The only representation of an agricultural instrument yet found in Assyria and or Babylonia is that of a plow on a black stone from the ruins opposite Mosul. It somewhat resembles in shape that now in common use. On the same stone is an altar or low building before which stands a priest, apparently performing some religious ceremony. Near him are the sacred tree, a bull, a heap of corn or a hill, a palm tree, and a square instrument with a small circle or wheel in each corner, the nature of which I am unable to determine. These sculptures are accompanied by an inscription in the Babylonian character. Sesame, millet, and corn formed anciently, as they still do, the principal agriculture produce of Assyria. Herodotus, who had visited this fruitful country, says that he dares not mention the height to which the sesame and millet grow. The only oil used in the country, according to the historian, was extracted from sesame, and now, in such case, although the olive tree is cultivated at the foot of the Kurdish hills. The palm tree was growing in the greatest abundance within the ancient limits of the Assyrian Empire, does not now produce fruit further north than the juncture of the lesser Zab with the Tigris. It is not indeed found on the banks of the later river more than 60 miles above Baghdad. But this is chiefly owing to the absence of cultivation and settled habitations. It is raised inland as far north as the small town of Tezes Kersmali, which takes the place of fresh dates, from the ripe fruit being there first met with on the road to Constantinople. A line drawn due west from this place to the Mediterranean world, I think, give the limit of the growth of the fruit producing palm. The unproductive tree will grow and will attain a considerable size much further north, even on the coastal coast of Asia Minor, and in the south of Italy and Dalmatia. That the fruit was exported in large quantity from the Babylonian plains, as is now, as an article of commerce may be inferred by palm wine, or a fermented liquor extracted from the date, being mentioned by Herodotus as the principal cargo brought by the rafts to Babylon from Armenia. We find also what is probably palm wine included in the statistical table of Karnak amongst the tribute offered to the Egyptians by the Tahai. As a geographical feature of Assyria are characterized by lofty mountains rising abruptly by the plains. Its climate is marked very opposite degrees of temperature. The soil being naturally rich, its produce is consequently as varied and plentiful. The lowlands are parched by heat almost rivaling that of a torrid zone. Aromatic herbs yielding perfume celebrated by the poets, indigo, opium, and sugarcane, besides corn and grain of various kinds, and cotton and flax in abundance, were raised in the region. In the cooler temperature of the hills, mulberry afforded sustenance to the silkworm, and many kinds of fruit trees flourished in the valleys. I wonder how my mulberries doing down there. When Herodotus says that the Assyrians did not cultivate the vine, the olive, and the fig, he must alluded to the inhabitants of the plains. The vine is represented in the sculptures, and the Assyrians not only enjoy the various luxuries with which tribes before, but possess the trees themselves. We learn from their own general Rabashka, who described his country to the Jews as a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive oil and honey. Amongst the objects tribute brought to the Egyptians from the Taha and from Narayana are corn, bread, palm wine, warm honey, incense, and conserve of dates. The domestic animals of the ancient Assyrians were probably such as are still found in the country. On the monuments are of the sheep, goats, oxen, horses, mules, and camels. In the reliefs in the center of Nimrod's mount, there appeared to be the figure of a dog standing near the tent, but not found in any other representation of this useful domestic animal. Although hunting scenes are portrayed on the walls of Khorsabad, we learn, however, from Herodotus that during the Persian occupation, the number of Indian dogs kept in the province of Babylon for the use of the governor was so great that 4 cities were exempted from taxes for maintaining them. They're raising hounds. Hounds of hell. And here is the ass represented by the sculptures also. Herodotus mentions it amongst the domestic animals in the country. Neither is the ass represented in the sculpture. And the mules of the prominent bas reliefs appear to belong to conquered people in possession of captive women are seen riding them and carrying them to spoil. They are correctly delineated and distinguished from the horse. The sheep represented bas reliefs are 2 kinds. One is a large broad tail is still found in the country, and the tail of the other. I like that Jacob sheep though. What is it? Joseph sheep? Jacob sheep? Yeah, I like that one with that big old 4 horn though. Yeah, look that up. They make a dangerous pet. They look cool though. As they amongst the spoil, and consequently they have a horn though. Horn, consequently belonging to the enemies of the Assyrians, may be sheep of Arabia, which excited the wonder of Herodotus. One, he says, is a large tail not less than 3 cubits in length, which a shepherd's trail would ulcerate. The shepherds therefore make little carts to support it. The other has a tail nearly a cubit in breadth. The goats have long spiral horns. The oxen are evident of 2 kinds and distinguished with the horns carved on the back of the head, and other having horns projecting in front. It's possible that distinction marks the buffalo and common ox. Of the Assyrian horses I have already had occasion to speak. Although the form of the camel is somewhat exaggerated, the character of the animal is faithfully portrayed. On the opposites is 2-humped or 2-hump, but it evidently came from afar and the native of Asia proper. The 1-humped camel, as it has been seen, was ridden even in war by the people conquered by the Assyrians, and the women represented mounted upon them. It be conjectured that it was commonly used as the beast of burden and brought tribute, collars, ornaments. They used horse or mule, or you pull out with a camel, probably a dye wool, and hung around his neck and mounted, and appears to have been guided, as still though custom in Arabia, by a simple halter headstall passing around the head of the jaw. The wild animals represented in the sculptures are neither natives of Syria or of foreign countries. Amongst the former we have the lion, the wild bull, the stag, the gazelle, the ibex, and the hare. The lion I've already observed and is now rarely found on the banks of the Tigris as far as Mosul or even Baghdad. That it was originally inhabited of the country can be no doubt. In the earliest period it was considered the noblest of game, including noblest game included amongst the wild beasts preserved in the paradise of the parks attached to royal residences and the monuments in Nineveh. The tribes of the king over the formidable animal was deemed. Oh yeah. And the wild bull. The ibex and the goat. Let's find the animals represented in the obelisk were evidently brought from distant countries presented to the Assyrian king as objects of tribute. The presence of the 2-humped camel proves that they came from the east and not from Africa. This animal is native to Bactrians, the great steppes inhabited by Tartar tribes. It is unknown to the Arabs and is rarely seen to the west of Persia, except amongst a few isolated families of Trichronians, which it now reside in the north of Syria, which is probably brought this beast of burden from the northeast, which they first immigrated. The small ears of the elephant on the same obelisk show that the animal is Indian and not of the African species. On Egyptian monuments, the elephant is seen amongst other animals brought as tribute by the Asiatic. Though not an Indian people, it was probably obtained by Asiatic. That is east and the eastward. But there is no record of the elephant having been indigenous to any part Asia west of the Indus, although it appeared in the Persian armies. It might even have been pastured long previously in the rich plains of Mesopotamia. It originally came to Indian dominions of the great king been used for war by the Assyrians, but doubtless have it's over there even represented in China too, being represented in sculpture. The presence of the rhinoceros on the obelisk further points to the Indian origin of accompanying animals. It is several respects incorrectly delineated sculpture having given a hoof and mane. It's basically a bunch of animals. We're going to bring all them animals in the ark. I mean, on the tablet. I mean, on the sculpture. Which appears to have been artificially curved. That of a sacred bull. Still the general form of the animal and the shape and position of the horn. The two animals accompanied with other Indians and antelopes and other sculptures. Where's the monkeys at? Distinguished. Sculptures evidently indicated by certain particularities. Country being so distinguished. A man follows two similar monkeys, one raising itself on the hind legs, the other sitting on the shoulders of his keeper. This may be the monkey regarded with some degree of religious veneration by the Indians and frequently domesticated by them. They appear to be the same species that represented the large bas-reliefs of the northwest palette of Nimrod, which are covered with spots or marks, probably intended to denote long hair. In a separate group are two monkeys or apes with strength of ferocity indicated by thick claws passed around in the bodies, held by keepers. The first raises forepaw to his mouth. The other monkey is distinguished. Yeah, there's stuff on there that I didn't know was there. I never thought about it. On the earliest monuments, we have no traces of fire worship, which is corruption performed by Zabism, but bas-reliefs curved as well as on a multitude of cylinders of some age. We have abundant proofs in the subsequent prevalence in Assyria. Although we may not at present possess sufficient materials to illustrate the most ancient Sabian and Assyrians, we think we confidently judge the nature of the worship of a later period. Symbols and religious ceremonies represented in the Kurdish and corner of the cylinders are identical to those of the ancient monuments in Persia. Sometimes sculptures of the Persepolis myth character resembled in every respect those of the Assyrians. The origin of the Chaldaic theology has ever been a favorite theme of the poet and philosopher. The Assyrian plains, erupted by a single immense and rarely shadowed by a passing cloud, looked upon as a fit place of the birth system which recognizes the heavenly bodies and types of supreme power, which invested in them with supernatural influences. The wonderful irregular periodic movements and even their effects upon the physical world must have been apparent to Chaldean shepherd long before it became the study of the philosopher and the priest, which he watched his sheep by night. He marked the stars as they rose above the horizon, and learned to distinguish one from another to invest the most remarkable groups, distinct forms, if the attributes of the deity were to be typified. If the limited intellect of man required palpable symbols to convey ideas which he could not understand in the abstract, more appropriate objects could not have been chosen than the bright luminaries, whose motions and influences were enveloped in mystery, although they themselves were constantly present. The transition from the adoration to the national system of astronomy is natural. It is not surprising that the Chaldeans, having been first to invest in heavenly bodies, sacred properties, should also have been the first to cultivate subliminals of sciences. The periodic movements in the heavenly bodies were ascertained by constant observation, originating probably in religious duties. Their causes were investigated in the process of time, and the motions themselves were calculated and predicted. When Alexander entered Babylon, he issued to have been presented with the archive. We're going to pause there, because I want to read that. On the On the mound itself and immediately above the great winged lion first discovered, a house was built for my Nestorian workmen and their families, and a hut to which any small objects discovered among the ruins could at once be removed for safety. I divided my Arabs into 3 parties, according to the branches of the tribe to which they belonged. About 40 tents were pitched on different parts of the mound, from the entrances to the provincial trenches. Oh, what was that? That was the palm wine being chiefly brought into Babylon from Armenia. And the palm being produced fruited and fruiting types, which I think that's almost, it's been showed anyway that those thought the sexes are shown to be male and female. They just produce no matter what under right circumstances. Anyway, I had another story. But it's there. But it actually goes on up north anyway, because it talked about going on up north. But this done moved over, and it says, and they were broke off into the parties according to the branches of the tribe. To which they belonged. About 40 tents were pitched on different parts of the mound, and all the entrances to principal trenches. 40 were placed around my dwelling, and the rest on the bank of the river, where the sculptures were deposited previous to the embarkation on the rafts. The men were all armed. I thus provided for the defense of all my establishment. Mr. Hired Bassman lived with me, and to him I confided the payment of the wages in all the accounts. He soon obtained an extraordinary influence among the Arabs. Of his fame spread through the desert. I divided my workmen into bands, set generally 8 or 10 Arabs who carried away the earth of baskets, and 2 or 4 Nestorian diggers, according to the nature of the soil and rubbish which was to be excavated. They were overlooked by a superintendent whose duty it was to keep them at their work and give them notice when the diggers approached slab or exposed any small object to view, that I might myself assist in uncovering and removal. I scattered a few Arabs, a hostile tribe, among